Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel for another video. It feels so weird to like start these videos up with like a big smile and being like, let's talk about devastating things. Did you see the title? But it's not devastating because obviously it's better, but it is just weird to be like, eating disorders, hi. Anyway, today I wanted to come and talk about the worst eating disorder symptom that I dealt with during my eating disorder. It was there on day one. It was there on the day I went to recovery. It was still there as I worked through my recovery. And it's what shows up in the majority of people's eating disorders. Now, is that to say that everyone's going to have the same symptoms, that they're going to have the same behavioral profiles? No. But this one, absolutely, statistically, is incredibly common, but also not talked about enough. And if you're worried like me, and we don't talk about behavioral stuff in detail here, we don't do instructive stuff. No, I'm not going to be describing behaviors or symptoms that are action-based to you. That is not what this is about. But this one is such an important one for us to talk about because one, it's not easily recognized as a symptom. And two, it's one of the symptoms that eating disorder is really, really good at convincing us is just about who we are, and it's immovable and it can't change. And as much as you try to recover, this is always going to stay the same. So the worst symptom that I dealt with throughout my eating disorder, it was there even before my eating disorder, it was there for as long as I can remember, was self-hatred. Absolute self-loathing to my core. Never had a nice thing to say about myself. From a young age, I used to get into my bathroom, take off all my clothes and like pick apart every inch of me, the way that I viewed myself as a person, not just my body, but as a person. I was always deficient. I was always, in fact, like the Taylor Swift quote that I think encapsulates what my self-hatred felt like was, sometimes I feel like everybody is a sexy baby and I'm a monster on the hill. Like, I don't think that everyone is sexy babies, but you know what I mean? Like everyone else is like shiny and wonderful and sweet and lovely and successful and fantastic and worthy. And I am just like this horrible thing, right? Inside and outside. It spilled from the inside into how I viewed and felt about my outside, right? And then my eating disorder obviously took that, amplified it, and ran with it. And I would say of my entire kind of like behavioral profile, I had anorexia, binge purge subtype. So I had a lot of behavioral stuff going on, a real pendulum of terrible going on. And it would shift and it would change, and some behaviors would become more dominant and others would recede, and then they'd come back and then there'd be a different combination. The self-loathing was consistently present all the way through, and it never receded and then came back in. It just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I was like, I don't think I can hate myself more. And my eating disorder was like, challenge accepted. Let's see what we can do with this. And all of a sudden I would be in an even deeper hole in terms of my sense of self, how I felt about myself, how worthy I felt. And it was probably the most dangerous symptom that I dealt with because it meant that I was increasingly isolated. I didn't feel worthy of connection, friendship, love, care, nothing. And when you hate yourself so much, when you have so much self-loathing, when your opinion of yourself is so negative, it feels uncomfortable to have people reflecting something completely opposite, telling you that you are loved, worthy, that they love spending time with you, that they think you're funny or smart or kind or whatever, is so incongruent that you push it away because we're really engineered to be as comfortable as possible, even if our place of comfort is an awful place. The friction between your estimation of yourself and that of your loved ones is so uncomfortable that you're like, oh, I'm just going to retreat back into what I know because that's comfortable. And when you're listening to an endless repetitive record that gets louder and angrier and more abusive 24/7, it is very strange to hear something else or to see something else being demonstrated that contradicts what you tell yourself all the time. So of course you don't necessarily want to be around that because we don't like discomfort, even if it's nice discomfort with people being lovely to you. So my isolation was absolutely fueled by the self-hatred that the eating disorder latched onto and made into its own fuel. It really was the thing pumping its own engine. And because I was becoming increasingly isolated, I was becoming more and more at risk because I didn't have anybody monitoring how much my mental health was falling apart. It is why from day one on this channel, the talking about food interests me to an extent. Talking about the body interests me to an extent. It's this part of the eating disorder that interests me and worries me the most in terms of people understanding how they work, because we lose so many people to unaliving themselves. What contributes so enormously to those rates is this unaddressed self-loathing, self-hatred, from some of those comorbidities like anxiety, depression, trauma that just don't get addressed because we're so busy looking at the behavioral stuff, we're so busy looking at the food, that there's just this glaring gap of like, this is where people are slipping through, right? Like we might be getting them better physically, we might be loosening the rigidities around their rules and their food, but like what's happening up here? Because when I talk to clients, and I think this is why it alarms me so much, when I talk to clients, they're like, oh no, that's just how it is. Like I just hate myself and I'm unworthy and I'm horrible and I deserve nothing good. And like, even if I recover, then like, that's not going to change. And I'm like, oh no, because if that's true, if they believe that's true, why would they be incentivized to recover? If, yeah, okay, a relationship with their food can improve, great, etc. But if your head is still going to be hell and it's still going to be abusing you and screaming at you and denigrating you, why would you do it, right? So I think it's so important to impress upon people this is a symptom. It surprises people to find out it is a symptom, just like the not sick enough stuff is a symptom. In my first year, probably my first 12 months of coaching, when I would have people come to me and be like, Mia, I'm not sick enough. Like there's no urgency here. I am not sick enough. I would try to help them find evidence to say that that wasn't true. And it was just so futile because there is no measure of symptoms or experience that the eating disorder is going to accept as sick enough. That's how it operates, because that thinking is a symptom, and we have to stop getting into the weeds with it and more stepping back and observing it and going, that thought, that belief is your eating disorder expressing a symptom, just as it's expressing a symptom when it's got you engaging in like a physical behavior, right? So instead of trying to qualify for them and help them find evidence that they were sick enough, we talked about it more as a symptom, just like this. This is not a wall that you hit where you're like, well, I hate myself, so like, why would I keep going? That's why you have to keep going, because we have to resolve the self-hatred. And that's obviously done with a multitude of approaches, therapy being the most important one, thought challenging, unpacking what you're telling yourself, making sure that you are maintaining or seeking out connections, staying connected to your people, to those people who can over time help to keep you anchored to the true measure of who you are, the true value and worth of yourself, until you can carry that for yourself. So important, because as much as not everybody is going to deal with self-hatred as a symptom, self-loathing as a symptom, we know statistically that the majority of people will, because of the alarming rates of people who have either considered unaliving themselves, have attempted to unalive themselves, or have unalived themselves as a result of their eating disorder. And we know that that stat is really high, even though we know that tracking that stat is really difficult, because a lot of those people who we lose to unaliving themselves, their death is not recorded as an eating disorder. It is recorded as unaliving themselves. So it's probably happening far more frequently than we even know. And what we do know is pretty terrifying. It's also something that absolutely needs to be addressed, because at some point it's going to provide a barrier to your recovery, right? Where it's going to keep telling you, I'm not worthy of recovery, I'm not worthy of getting better, I'm not worthy of all these things that I'm trying to work on, and I'm setting goals. And yeah, I can do the goals, but I don't feel deserving of the bigger goals, which are to find freedom and happiness and purpose and connection and success. Like whatever your goals are, that self-hatred is going to invalidate the goals, and therefore invalidate your attempts at reaching those goals. And therefore the little things that you have to do seem pointless. Working on that, seeing it first and foremost as something that can be worked on, that is not necessarily going to continue to be your headspace. It's not going to continue to be your sense of self. It can change. I remember being in therapy and it really feeling like a light bulb went on when I was like, I don't have to hate myself. Maybe this work is going to mean that I'm not going to hate myself. That felt scary, right? Even, something I wanted so badly to not hate myself once it was introduced to me, even as a concept, was so scary, because like, oh God, what's on the other side of that? At least I know what this sounds like. At least I know what it looks like and feels like. I don't know what it would look like or feel like to not live in this headspace. And it's not just going to turn off and be taken away overnight. It is incremental. It does happen with time, just like recovery. It happens incrementally. It happens with time. You adjust as you change, right? But even just to start considering it as something that can be worked on without then putting the pressure on yourself in terms of like, oh, something else I've got to work on. Does that then mean that we live in this rainbow puppy bunny land where we love ourselves constantly and we, never ever have a bad thought about ourselves or hold ourselves accountable or whatever? No, that would not be healthy either. Everything's about finding a more neutral area with your relationship with yourself, right? Just like with our body image, we don't want to swing from hate to love and then have that as our expectation that that's where we live forever. Again, it wouldn't be healthy even if we could. It's about finding a place that is productive, right? When I screw up, it is productive for me to tell myself, Mia, you screwed up. You could have done that better. And when you do it next time, this is how you could do it better. Not shaming myself, because that's not going to lead to change. We know that. We have research to tell us that shaming someone or ourselves for anything is not going to lead to change. It just keeps us in a cycle of whatever we're in. But I can be honest with myself, and that's on both sides. I can tell myself when I've done a good job, and I can tell myself when I've done a crappy job, and to reassess and change course or do whatever I've got to do. So that's the goal, is not if you're thinking, oh, well, Mia, the opposite of self-hatred is self-love, and that just seems so insurmountable and impossible. It's like, nope, that's not. Don't tell yourself that it's a binary, that it's one of two choices. Our relationship with ourselves lives on a spectrum, and it's about being conscious of where we're sitting on that spectrum. And if you are firmly in that self-hatred portion, you do not have to live there. So I hope that was helpful. If that's something that you resonate with, let me know. There's a couple of tickets left for the Body Neutrality Workshop. We have some amazing people coming to that. I'm very, very excited for it. So make sure that you check out the event and the tickets below. It's a week together. It is online, so you can join from anywhere in the world. I've had many people be like, Mia, I wish I could come, but I don't live in Sydney. And I'm like, you don't need to. You wouldn't be able to go to anything even if you were in Sydney. It's all online. You can do it at your own pace, even if it doesn't work for your time zone, because everything's recorded and we're interacting all week in our Facebook group so that you can catch up with things at your own pace. And we've got a couple of lives that we do if we can get together, but they're recorded. So if you can't be there, ask your questions beforehand, they'll get answered, and then you can watch it back in your own time. Have a beautiful weekend, everybody. It is getting warmer here in Sydney. I would love to know what you guys are doing. Let me know your plans. I'm catching up with a girlfriend from high school for 1 or 2 wines. That's all it will be. Sending you all so much love. See you next week. Bye, guys.